Hey guys, welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. In each episode, we're going to have conversations with some of the top investors, superstar founders, as well as well-known tech company executives in Silicon Valley. We'll have a coffee chat with them to learn their way of thinking and actionable tips on how they build or invest in a successful company. Before we start our show today, I want to make sure the listener, aka you, understand that everything a person say on the podcast only reflects hers or his own opinion, not the show or the company they work at. Our guest today is a partner at Vertex Ventures US, where he invests in early-stage enterprise startups. Prior to Vertex, he worked on M&A and business development at companies like Tesla and Dropbox. When he started his career, he worked closely with Robert Herjavec, the nice shark from APC's Shark Tank. His name is Domenic Perri. Welcome to the show, Dom.
Thanks, Grace. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Dom, today you're a partner at Vertex Ventures US. Prior to that, you have done BD and M&A at Dropbox and Tesla. You are the second Canadian on the show, I believe. Before the career in tech and venture, I believe your first job was at the TD Bank. To start the show, I'd love for you to share with us more about how your career started and evolved.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Grace. Definitely a lot of great Canadians both in the Bay Area and all throughout the U.S. For me, just stepping back, I think, I have to look at my parents to start. I think I'm really lucky to have wonderful parents who taught me to work hard, be a good person, and treat everyone around you with kindness and respect. My parents are immigrants, and I'm first-generation Canadian and now American. After graduating from college in Toronto, I was lucky to land my first tech job at an exciting startup. This was in the cybersecurity space. In fact, back then it was not called cybersecurity. We had gotten acquired a few years later, and then I got a great opportunity in New York City to work in tech on Wall Street, which is really exciting. This was early 2000, just months before the historic .com bubble burst. So the timing was not the best. And then, of course, 9/11 happened the following year, and I lived 500 feet away from the World Trade Center. It was, really difficult time for everyone. I remember my family and friends were, urging me to leave New York and come back home. And I just was super determined to forge ahead and was really resourceful during a really unprecedented moment in our history. And I never quit. And I think that experience taught me, so much, and not least of which is to expect the unexpected, which certainly in this, current environment, it's good to have, that experience. And then, a few years later, I was offered a job in Silicon Valley and joined the corp dev team at Juniper Networks and have lived in San Francisco ever since.
From our interactions in the past, I feel like you are a very people person. Who do you normally consult career advice from? Besides awesome people skills, what kind of technical skill do you have before getting into a venture? And how do you acquire them?
Sure. So I guess on the people around you question, I would say that, I have always believed the journey of building authentic relationships is really the most important thing you can do for your career. And I constantly cross paths with people I've worked with many years ago. At the very highest levels, I got to work with some incredible leaders. I got my career start with Robert Herjavec, who I mention him often. A lot of people know him on the Shark Tank. I've known him for 20 years. He taught me a lot in the early part of my career. Was fortunate to work with people like Tom Noonan, who's the CEO of ISS and is now a VC amongst many other things. Got to work with Kevin Johnson for a few years. He used to be a former top Microsoft executive. Now he's the CEO of Starbucks. Folks like Rami Rahim, who's the CEO of Juniper Networks, just an incredible leader. And now really lucky to be working with my amazing partners at Vertex US, who, by the way, are much more smarter than me and way more interesting than me. I just have so much admiration for them and honored to be their partner. I get asked that a lot. So I'd say my advice has always been to build a strong network and put yourself in, proximity of those you can learn from that are going to nourish your growth. And if you want to accelerate your career and grow your business, and I think you need to maintain those relationships. You've got to find unique ways to, reconnect over time, whether it's a coffee or nowadays a virtual coffee, or even sharing stories over email.
Totally.
You asked about the, skills required or technical skills. I would, looking back, I'm fortunate to have worked with some really excellent BD and corp dev people. And those roles share some common skills. I think first it starts with relationships, both internal and external. I think you need to build trust and credibility at your company across all the key functional areas, such as engineering, product, legal, and of course, working with your executive team. Externally, you want to be known as someone who is reliable and trustworthy as your office of your company that you're representing. On the negotiation side, I think that's a key skill. And what I mean by that is, the best BD people are really well prepared, can run a process, are good communicators, and focused on driving the right outcome. And on the technical side, I would say, just knowing your product and market is really important, or as some people like to say, having some product chops, because often the deal or partnership that you're driving will impact your own product or your go-to-market. I'd say the last thing would be just around, project management, and just there's so much coordination involved when doing a deal. And people are really counting on you to drive things forward. So keeping everyone on the same page is really important too.
Yeah, totally. I feel like you definitely have the most wonderful board of advisors. I think creating a relationship is not necessarily that hard. To have the coffee for the first time may be easy, but how do you follow up with them? How do you build the value metrics to convince them to chat with you for the second or third time? Or how do you keep the conversation going in a professional manner or establish a friendship? How do you approach the relationship going forward?
Sure. One thing I like to do is think about how I can give back and do something for them. So that's something that's always top of mind. But I do think a lot of it is just staying in touch, being your true self, being authentic, finding ways where you can give back, add value, help them. Also, introducing them to other people has also been helpful as well. So often I think of who else could benefit from, knowing my friend or this person, and that usually leads to new friendships and new connections that people will always sort of be thankful for or remember you for. So it sort of goes into the comment I made earlier around just sort of creative, being creative on, maintaining those relationships.
Yeah. You mentioned some core skills, for example, communication skills, product skills, project management skills. What are some actions you took to advance these skills? Do you take any courses? How do you learn, for example, the product chops? Do you go to product school? How do you educate yourself on those subject matters?
Having worked at a number of different companies now, a lot of it you sort of look back at the strategy of the company and where it's going. I think really understanding that really well is important. Understanding the market around you, the TAM, your competitors, and probably most important is your customers. Understanding how and why are they using the product, and just really understanding that really well, and understanding how that experience can be 10% better or even 10x better, and thinking about the things that you can do as a team, whether it's sort of organic to the company, and sort of bringing that in to help make the product a better experience. So a lot of it is these cross-functional relationships that I mentioned before. I think it's just really important to understand where each of them stand, what's the strategy from their side, and just understanding that really well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. understanding the motivation behind the customer is really important. In terms of career development, you are a partner at Vertex. What's a day-to-day like for you? VCs have really long feedback loop. How do you set up the KPI for yourself, and how do you manage the day-to-day?
Yeah, it's a good question. Providing guidance and mentorship to founders is a big part of our day at Vertex US. It might seem rather flexible, but our days are pretty packed between meetings, research, due diligence, and advising startups. We really think long term, and so measuring success is fluid. And you just sort of touched on that in your question. For me, day to day, I really focus on just driving high yield outcomes, and I'm constantly thinking about how to develop creative ways to get our broad ecosystem of relationships to engage with our portfolio companies in a authentic and meaningful way.
A lot of tech startups have cutting edge technologies. How do you understand the technical aspect of a company, especially as someone coming from a business background? How do you educate yourself on the sophisticated technical knowledge so you can come up with strategic solutions for them going forward?
Well, we're really focused on specific areas of the market that we as a team at Vertex know really well. Combined, we've got decades of experience of starting companies, building companies, scaling companies, acquiring and selling companies. And these are all in spaces that we like to say we've earned the right to have a very strong opinion because we know it rather well. We've got the scar tissue or been in the trenches, so to speak. And we meet, sort of new founders that are creating, new companies on solving these evolving problems. We've got a pretty good grasp on it. So we can ask sort of the right and deep questions around this space because we've been studying it, we know it. And those are, that's why we sort of try to stay in our swim lanes, if you will, because we know it really well and we can be extremely particular. And it's also why we are only making a handful of investments a year.
Speaking of your background, you spent years in BD and the M&A space. Before Vertex, you worked at Dropbox on the BD team. I imagine selling a product with the brand of Dropbox can be a lot easier compared to helping startups sell a product. What do you think are the similarities in terms of the approach you took between relationship building in startups versus well-known tech companies?
Yeah, good question. I've been on both sides of the table, not just at Dropbox, but also Juniper and a number of other large companies as well as some small startups. The question, makes me think about how startups often miss out on the opportunities to develop relationships at larger tech companies with, let's just use, corp dev teams as an example. And there's several reasons for that. I think whether it's thinking the stars may not be aligned or the timing is off, or they don't want to come across as like weak signaling, or they might be thinking, hey, we're not ready for M&A or a strategic partnership. All of those are valid things to be aware of. But the advice I typically give to startups is just because you're not ready to, for example, sell your company, that may not be the goal, but just using it as an example, it doesn't mean you shouldn't invest time in building relationships with, in this case, corp dev teams at really big companies. There's a number of host of benefits and advantages for the founder and the company down the road that might not be obvious today. I'll give you a really quick example. So recently I was talking to a good friend of mine who's the head of corp dev at a large publicly traded company, and they recently made an acquisition. And when I asked him why they chose that specific company over so many other choices, he gave me a very clear answer. And a few years ago, they had met the founders. They built a relationship with them over time. That relationship grew and blossomed, and they got to learn a lot about the company, the team, and the market. And eventually, my friend made a compelling case to his leadership team around that space and why they should sort of invest or acquire. And, they ended up proceeding to, do a deal or an acquisition in that space. And you can guess who they ended up choosing. And it was really because of, that early relationship that they had built, that sometimes takes, years to cultivate. But, again, it's a proof point on why you should start that process now and talk to these larger companies.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Startups need to build relationships early. If I'm running a startup, I want to partner with Dropbox or Tesla, creating some sort of collaborations in the future. How do I go about it? Do I cold email the corp dev team on LinkedIn?
Yeah, two things come to mind. I think one is, of course, as a early stage company, you should really lean on your investors. At Vertex, we are always making introductions for our founders and introducing them to the right people at these large corporates. So that is usually a great way to do it, through a warm introduction. And then I'd say the other, data point that is helpful is when you have some customers that are sort of asking for this partnership or joint solution. That is a very credible and good example to sort of bring to bear to these larger companies and say, hey, these customers are, really important to both of us. They're asking us to work together. Here's how we think about it and why it's important for you, and just help them really understand sort of what's in it for them is really important as well.
Yeah, if I'm a startup founder, I have no clear value proposition. My product is not as solid as I want it to be. How do I identify what I could bring onto the table?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a reason, right? I don't think it should just be like, hey, you're Google and we want to partner with you. It should be, a number of those reasons I mentioned earlier. Either you're aware that there's a gap that you can fill and you do it in a unique and differentiated way, or there's a number of customers that are asking you for this integration or this partnership and why it's important. And, or there's ways where you can increase their top line or margin. There's, depending on the types of partnerships with like SIs and resellers are always looking for, hey, how can we wrap more services around, these sort of new innovative startups that are coming up. I think if you're addressing that head on, you'll get their attention.
After I got the first meeting as a founder, how do I maintain the relationship with the big tech company? As you mentioned in the story, that startup had ongoing conversations with the big company. How do I demonstrate that I can deliver value moving forward to land the next meetings?
What comes to mind is, showing the data, right? Showing metrics, from thinking back around the ecosystem integration partnerships that we developed, whether it was at Dropbox or other companies. You want to show engagement, usage, real metrics that show that it's working and it's meaningful. I think that would be a key talking point to come back to, the partnership team that you're working with.
In terms of working as a global head of M&A integration at Tesla, how do you make a deal happen at a big company?
For the Tesla experience, I think it'd be helpful to just quickly walk through what that experience was. When I decided to join, I was part of a very small M&A team. Tesla historically is not very acquisitive, but this was shortly after the company had made two recent acquisitions with Solar City and an engineering company in Germany. And Tesla was going through a lot of changes at that time. This was early 2017, and we were behind on Model 3 deliveries. So I remember my first week on the job, I was asked to fly to Germany and help lead the integration of 700 engineers out there, which was all meant to help accelerate the production of Model 3. Culturally, this was a very small rural town in Germany, and it was night and day from what I was used to. So I had to very quickly learn about the European labor laws and how things are done very differently out there and at a very different pace. But it was a good experience for me to help bring a Silicon Valley way of doing things to Germany and help create a unified culture. And we essentially established Tesla in Germany, and it was very successful. So it was a short period in my career, but we did a lot in a short time frame, and it was fun for me to do something different. It was clear early on that that function of automation and engineering was really core and needed in an urgent way at that time. That really helped accelerate the need to do a deal at that time.
Yeah, totally. Speaking of acquisition and integration, does the scope of work primarily focus on identifying the acquisition target or more towards the integration part?
Well, from a integration point of view, that person in that role is a key part of the M&A process, even in the very onset of that process. So as you are looking at targets and exploring that market, immersing yourself in that with the M&A team is just really important. So you understand sort of the macro things that are happening and understanding the players and also the differences between the companies. So when you do get to a particular target, you will have already, gotten to know a lot about that market or that space, the competitors, and knowing a lot about that company going into the conversation and the team. So you're already accelerating your knowledge, if you will. And so as you go through the negotiating process, you're really working side by side with the deal team, because you are sort of part of that, M&A team, and already starting to think through, culturally, how are we going to integrate the team, the leadership, organizationally, how it's going to be structured. All of those things are really critical to the deal success. So the sooner you are involved in the process, the better. And that's why I always advocate, an M&A integration person should really be, should have a seat at the table from day one.
When it comes to acquisition and integration, sometimes it's focusing on the talent. Sometimes it's because of the technology innovation. What are some challenges people tend to overlook when it comes to the integration process?
There are many. Acquisitions are really hard, and a lot of it rests on a successful integration strategy, and many companies don't do that well. So I'll point out one thing that really comes to mind, and that's around just communication related to uncertainty. So typically when you're acquiring a company, the employees at that smaller company are often concerned about the future, right? They're like, okay, what does this mean? Is my job safe? Like, what's going to happen? So communicating the strategic rationale as to why this is a good idea and why we are uniting these two companies together, and just sharing that thinking around the narrative really helps people understand and the logic behind it. Then helping them understand what their future looks like at this sort of new company, and what their career is going to look like going forward. I think for most small companies being acquired into a big company, there are numerous benefits and opportunities. This is an opportunity for them to really sort of step up and shine and lead that, their role or function into this new company. So a lot of really great opportunities. And I think it's your job to explain that and highlight it and just get to know everyone, and just do a really good job with communicating. I mean, one quick example with Tesla, I had Elon do a all hands with the people in Germany, because that really helped people understand his thinking around why we did the acquisition and how he is thinking about Germany as a whole, and what does that mean for Tesla. So that made people feel really good, and it was nice for them to see him and hear from him. So so doing a lot of that is really important. I'm glossing over a lot of the details because integration is very detail oriented and project management oriented, but those are just a couple of quick sort of anecdotes or examples.
Yeah, totally. I love it. In terms of expertise, what's your information diet look like? How do you educate yourself on the latest tech trends?
Yeah, I'm constantly reading. There are several newsletters I follow, and I really like mainly try and spend my time each morning reading through the latest tech news, whether it's Wall Street Journal or Fortune. I really like Axios and Protocol. For VCs, Strictly VC is a great newsletter. So it's consuming a lot of that. And then, some of the more meatier stuff, I'm a big fan of industry research reports from analyst firms such as 451 Research. I find the research reports of the state of M&A and corp dev really helpful. In addition to reports around specific industries and markets, we're exploring investment opportunities at Vertex US.
Per to VC and corp dev, you've had experiences in BD and sales. From business development to corp dev to VC is many people's dream. I know that we have a lot of listeners who are early on in their career journey. If I'm a junior employee working as an account executive or BDM, how should I plan my career to get into VC?
You're 100% correct that it takes time to make career shifts. So think deeply about what you're really good at and how you want to spend your time. For example, moving to venture capital was something I wanted to do for a while before it actually happened. I made a deliberate effort to move into the VC world, and it started by developing relationships with other VCs and helping founders all throughout my career. So when I met my partners, Jonathan Heiliger, Insik Ri, and Sandy Madra, and now Chase Roberts as well, it was clear that it was a tremendous opportunity to work alongside a phenomenal team of experienced enterprise investors. And I had to jump at the chance.
As someone with BD background, how do you position yourself? What do you see as your strength, and how do you pick the right VC firm to join?
I've been harping a lot on the relationship side, but it's a people business at the end of the day, and it's really sort of surrounding yourself with the right types of people, and bringing that to bear to help your portfolio companies, and sort of this example where we're investing in a lot of early stage founders. So we're constantly looking for ways to accelerate their growth, accelerate their success. And a lot of that is through our relationships. I'd say the other thing is just all the career experience and bringing that to bear. We've all, done company building and lots of different deals and transactions. So having been through a lot of those experiences hands-on, we can often help our founders navigate through a lot of those same types of experiences and processes that we all went through as well.
Speaking of that, many people working in BD, how do you make yourself stand out? You're obviously an overachiever. How did you make yourself more competitive in each step of the way?
Yeah, be yourself first and foremost. I think that's really important is don't try and be someone you're not. That whole saying of fake it till you make it. I don't know how much of that is true. I think you need to do the work, be really prepared. And, if you go back to a few of the things I mentioned earlier around the relationship aspect of both internally as well as externally, is really going to be super important as far as building credibility and trust. And it starts there for people working at companies. That is extremely important. If you can develop those really strong relationships with people from the exec team all the way down to folks in the trenches, it's going to be really important. And, doing deals, I think, requires a lot of preparation, a lot of communication, and just, really driving the right types of outcomes, not doing things for yourself or doing favors for the other side. It's really having a strategy and driving the right outcome that everybody's looking for, and just communicating throughout the steps that you're driving is going to be, really important. And I think doing those things will help you stand out. People will look to you as a leader, and you'll be showing people that you know what you're doing, you're prepared, you're communicating, you're keeping everyone up to date. And those are really important to sort of maintain that credibility and that trust.
I really like what you said about building relationships should not only focus on the executives, but people who work on specific things too. To make a deal happen, you should make sure all levels are on the same page. We talk about building a good network. You are one of the core teams of BD by the Bay. I went to one of the online events a few weeks ago. It was a great experience. Seems like many BD professionals showed up. A lot of people were asking great questions, very hands-on. Do you want to tell us more about it?
Yeah, well, thanks, Grace. I mean, for those listening, BD by the Bay began as an in-person gathering for business development professionals interested in technology partnerships to exchange ideas and build and deepen relationships. This year, we switched to a virtual panel, given the current climate. And we had industry leaders like Alan Chabra, the SVP from MongoDB, Maureen Little, the VP of Partnerships from Okta, Matt Smith, VP of Channels from Duo, Zach Kilpatrick, VP of Alliances from Okta. And to your point, Grace, it was super well attended. I think there was, over 75 people that were on and listening to, this awesome panel that we put together. And, the panelists, they led a really fantastic discussion on many ways that tech partnerships can add value and drive channel sales. So we wanted to sort of marry those two topics that are often really separate. So we wanted to bring people from both sides and talk about, sort of force multiplying that. So for the BD people that are listening, we'd love you to join our LinkedIn group.
Yeah, BD by the Bay is definitely amazing to join. A lot of our audiences are younger. They probably really want to achieve what you have achieved one day. What do you think you did right that got you to where you are today? And what do you think you wish you could have done more when you were younger?
It's a great question. I don't think there's any one particular answer, but being curious, asking a lot of questions, taking the initiative is something that I think has made a difference. So it's not just about showing up. It's really being proactive, reaching out to people, but more so than that, like taking that step is really important, but it shouldn't be just like, hey, I want to just pick your brain or whatnot. Like you really should try and do your homework and bring something more to that person and understand, for someone trying to contact you, Grace, they should listen to a few of your podcasts and look at your background and, really point out like something that resonated with them. And I think that could ignite a really great conversation. So, even an example that comes to mind is when I was in London just before I started with Vertex US, and somehow I started chatting with Harry Stebbings in the UK. I was, really enjoying his podcasts and follow him on Twitter, and we exchanged emails, and I just happened to be in London, and I told him that, and he said, well, let's get together for lunch. And and I think it all started with just a little bit of engagement on some of the thoughts that he would put out there and I would respond to, and that started to develop the relationship. I mean, it was just one example that came to mind, but we ended up meeting in person and had a really nice lunch, and sort of the beginning of connecting with new people.
Yeah, what did you guys eat? I'm just kidding.
It actually was a really good lunch. Really cool part of London.
In terms of having soft skills / relationship building, we talked about two kind of relationship dynamics. One is about peer relationships building. For example, we could participate at events in BD by the Bay, and the other part could be keeping in touch with someone who is more senior and accomplished. For the more senior relationships, or we say mentorships, how should we interact with the people we respect, but also not be annoying?
You'd be surprised. A lot of people really appreciate when you reach out to them because my earlier comment of just being proactive and taking the initiative, look, a lot of people don't do that. And I think when you do it, people, not everyone, but a lot of people do appreciate that. And then when you combine that with new and interesting things to talk about, you end up having a really fruitful conversation. So let's take even, sales or BD, people that you may have worked with in the past, but haven't talked to in a while. A lot of things have changed with the way you sell technology today, or the way you do BD and partnerships, or the way you do M&A. Like things are different, and they've evolved from where they were 5 or 10 years ago. So there are always new and interesting things to talk about. And I think when you are prepared and you're bringing unique insights to that person or to the conversation, they're going to really appreciate that. And you'd be surprised, they too will learn something from, that conversation. I am always learning every day. And even when I talk to people that are really early in their career or just starting out, I learn so much from them as well. So it truly is a, sort of symbiotic nature of a relationship. And that's the beauty of, engaging your network and meeting new people. There's always so much you can learn from other people, even if you are bringing a lot of knowledge and insights to the table. That's great. And you should do that. But I think, you'll also learn a lot as well.
Having peer group is really important in our career. A lot of our deep conversations are with peers. They could understand and relate to our situation a lot better than other people. On the other hand, they could also be our competitors. Sometimes because of people working in the same industry, they could all fight for the same opportunities. How do you view competition?
Well, on the VC side, it is interesting. It's a tight-knit group. Everyone sort of knows everyone. Of course, there is some healthy competition there, but there's a lot of cooperation and partnership. You're co-investing oftentimes, so having really good relationships with your peers across the VC industry is really important. So I always love to catch up with people similar in my role at other VC firms and just talk about the things that are working, not working. How can we collaborate more? How can we do things together? How you can also share insights into certain companies that they may want to invest in the future. So I do think it's important, both at a peer level and just broader industry level, to be having those conversations. I think they're really healthy to be doing that. And while it may be more comfortable to talk with your peers, you should get out of your comfort zone and talk to others outside of that circle. And that's where, you can develop a lot of new and interesting relationships.
How do you normally meet people? Would it be through LinkedIn or at events?
Pre-COVID, I definitely would love to go to events. There were a lot of them and a lot of different unique events that you'd have an opportunity to meet a lot of people. And I think you still need to be proactive when you go to those events and do some homework beforehand and look to, who's going to be speaking, who's going to be there, who do you want to meet, what do you want to get out of the event? Those are all things you should ask yourself. In this day and age, in more of a virtual world, there's a lot of communities that you can join and be a part of. On the BD side, there's so many. There's partnership leaders, Fernio, there's just so many. I'm part of the C100, which is an incredible group of Canadian leaders and founders, just so many. And of course, LinkedIn. So really being part of those networks and contributing is a great way to stand out, be different, and meet new people.
You were originally from Canada. Curious, what's your perspective on global investing? What's your thought on the Canadian startup ecosystem?
Yeah, we do have a global reach because Vertex US is part of a global Vertex Ventures network. We do have a global view. We tend to invest more in the US and also Canada. We just led a seed deal in my hometown of Toronto. Really excited about that company, ops level. And the majority of our investments are in the US, but our colleagues and peers at the other Vertex funds around the world, throughout Asia and Europe, allow us to sort of have a broad aperture on what's happening globally, and so we can collaborate that way. But most of our portfolio is North America.
In terms of deal sourcing, do you more focus on referral from your personal network, or do you more focus on industry research on who is an industry leader?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Because Vertex US invests at such an early stage, meaning not just seed and Series A, but this also means before even a product sometimes is even developed or there's any customers or anything like that. It could just really be the ideation or initial formation stage. We love that. And, we love to get to know founders that are at that stage and thinking about the idea to create a company, and we can help them with that. We can help them realize the vision or the dream they have for this technology or company they want to build, and sort of help them on that journey, whether it's introducing them to key people in our network, introducing them to potential design customers that can help them develop the product. We've done that numerous times, and fast forward now, Vertex has been doing this for a little over 5 years. We have a number of companies where we've done that are now at the Series C, Series D stage. So it's really, really satisfying to be part of that from the really early beginning.
If I'm a startup founder trying to get invested by Vertex, what are some benchmarks I should have met before we start the conversation?
Yeah, we love to hear from founders, and we want to be part of that early conversation and be really early in the journey with them. And we'd love to hear what they're developing and why, and sort of the history leading up to why they're choosing to solve this problem. And I think what we can contribute to the conversation is our collective decades of experience, and really bring that to the conversation, which we love to do. So we love having those conversations early.
In terms of managing the current portfolio, how often do you meet with them? VCs are really focused on the value add. If I got invested by Vertex, what are some major benefit I could have besides the funding?
Yeah, we've created this concept of a platform, and that's where we are bringing to bear our collective experience and our networks to benefit our portfolio. And we've got a deep ecosystem of relationships. So it's a pretty valuable network of people that we can activate for our portfolio. At the earlier stages, a lot of our founders are still thinking through how to hire the right people, how to create the right types of partnerships or go to market. And these are all areas that we can spend time with them and help them think through and develop the right strategy for. So that's, I think, where we're adding a lot of value for our portfolio companies.
Totally. So we're at the last part of our interview. So I have a little fire round for you. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
I'd say early on, my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, he helped me a lot think through what I wanted to do next, and sort of helped open the door to the tech world for me. And then I think a lot of the people I mentioned earlier were just sort of luminary types of people that I just learned so much from. They may not be in my personal advisor network, but they're people that I respect and learned a lot from.
Where can we find you when you're not at work?
I was traveling a lot, but now I'm bouncing around between San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Toronto is usually my 3 points of destination where you can find me.
Which one is your favorite?
I love them all. That's why I frequent them, on a regular basis.
Nice. I love it. Dom, thank you so much for coming onto the show today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Grace. I really enjoyed it. It was really fun.
All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Smart Venture Podcast. If you like it, please leave us a quick review and hit subscribe so you don't miss any tips from the experts. If you want to receive our updates, please leave your email at smartventurepod.com. If you want to connect with me, all my socials are at Grace Gong Chichi. Besides LinkedIn, it's just Grace Gong. I'd love to connect with you and let me know your thought about the show. Now, you can also listen to Smart Venture Podcast on YouTube. Go to smartventurepod.com, click the YouTube link on the top banner. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash the like button. See you next time.